ELAC today gives gratitude and respect to past and present Gabrielino, Tomba, Kish people, the original caretakers of this land, whose traditional, unyielded homeland we occupy today on the ELAC campus. As an educational institution, we recognize our responsibility to highlight Indigenous histories and advocate for practices, policies, and actions to bring justice for past, present, and emergent Native communities. With that, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome all of you, our faculty, administrators, staff, students, community members, distinguished guests and speakers to our Racial Equity and Social Justice Town Hall. Thank you for being here today. We appreciate your presence in joining us and welcoming our esteemed American theater giant and author, Luis Valdez, who will be in conversation with theater scholar, Dr. Jorge Huerta. Let's give him a hand of applause, please. Today's event has been made possible due to the wonderful contributions and support from our fearless leader, President Dr. Alberto Roman, theater professor, from our theater, also fearless professor and colleague, Cristina Frias, and our wonderful theater department. I also want to say thank you to our facilities, operations, marketing, and professional development team. Let's give them a hand of applause, please. As many of you know, our town halls provide us with an unparalleled opportunity to embrace the many milestones accomplished throughout the years as a community in Raza, as well as to reflect on the issues of equal rights and current injustices. The focus of today's town hall is to celebrate the 2021 publication of Luis Valdez, Theater of the Spear, The Vibrant Being. And this is the book. It's beautiful. We will discuss the unique aesthetic more than 5 decades in the making that defines the work of El Teatro Campesino, how we can unite our collective voices to foster activism, community, and healing through social justice lens. Now, I would like to introduce a leader and an equity and social justice champion who over the years has fought tirelessly for our students and to ensure that we do have an inclusive campus. He has dedicated his career to diversity, equity, and inclusion issues and to outreach to underserved communities, particularly the development of young Latino, Latina, and African-American students. So without further ado, I would like to introduce President Alberto Roman to the stage.
Wow. How we doing, Raza? How we doing? What an honor, man. I have to tell you, I'm humbled and honored to be here before all of you. In this special, I would call it historic moment for East Los Angeles College, as we welcome 2 respected leaders in the Chicano movement, and again, the causa, to advance social justice and racial equity for all of our communities across Los Angeles, the entire state, and of course, the nation. You know, we're celebrating Cinco de Mayo too, with beautiful Mexican Latino culture history, but we're also gathered to examine that intersection of the arts, of society, specifically the role of the arts in theater in addressing issues that are facing our communities. Let me first take the opportunity again to thank our marvelous leader who was spearheading this event, Cristina Frias. Let's give her another round of applause, please. Dr. Nancy Ramirez, the Professional Development Office, of course, let's give them a round. They were very instrumental in this. Our vice presidents are here, Michael Pascual, Miguel Dueñas, the entire faculty, staff, and administration team. Thank you so much for being part of this wonderful event. I really want to thank you for being here to celebrate with us. El Teatro Campesino has been at the forefront using theater as a artistic generator of social change. You know, Luis Valdez created a movement and unapologetically delve into the challenges of being part of a collective effort of social change. Throughout this work, Valdez showcased the social inequality of the farm worker experience. And he shed light on the Mexican American culture to the rest of the world, made community with audiences, and really humanized the experience of all of us Chicanos and Latinos. We recognize that our current reality reflects injustices against Black, Latinos, Indigenous people, people of color. The reality of living through the devastating pandemic and the ongoing struggle for equality and the economic devastation for marginalized communities should not paralyze, but rather propel us to change forward with the knowledge that our history informs us and our passion and commitment to artistic excellence fuels all of us. So as a campus, we're committed to generating social change through many outlets, including the arts. This is why today is so special. Advocating for social change is ongoing, and this is why for over 50 years, Luis Valdez, through El Teatro Campesino, made it his mission to spotlight the dignity of human rights, the dignity of the people that work in the fields. His dedication to theater and advocacy for Latino communities is noteworthy, isn't it? Let's give him a round of applause, please. And I'll just say in closing, my hope is that learning in from the community equips all of us to be those agents, the agents of positive change and progress, and spur creative and civic discourse. That's what we're doing today through the learning, understanding, and addressing the current social issues and the historical trauma. And we can ensure that our cultural legacies will continue to enrich the lives of the generations to come, the young Latinas, the young Chicanas and Chicanos that are coming behind us. So without further ado, please, let's engage in a thoughtful conversation with none other than Luis Valdez, Dr. Jorge Huerta, and of course, Professor Cristina Frias.
Thank you, President Ramon, for your leadership and continuous support with these thought-provoking town halls. Now, our much anticipated conversation with Luis Valdez and Jorge Huerta will be moderated by one of our theater professors, Cristina Frias. Professor Frias is an award-winning theater artist, actor, organizer, and educator born and raised in Los Angeles. She holds a Bachelor's of Arts from UC Berkeley and an MFA from the Institute of Cal Arts. Professor Frias is the full-time Chicana, Latinx faculty in the Theater Arts Department of East Los Angeles College. Her position, that's right. Her position includes being a co-advisor to the Performance East Club, teaching acting classes for the stage and screen, serving on the Professional Development Committee, and acting as a community liaison to the larger Los Angeles arts community. Since starting at ELAC, she has directed 2 productions, East Los Risings and Electricity. Both of these productions laid the foundation for Chicano Theater 121, a course that Professor Frias wrote in 2021 and was recently approved and accredited class. Chicana X Theater is now offered every semester in the ELAC Theater Department, online and in person. So we hope to see you there. So please welcome to the stage both the giants in theater. We have Luis Valdez and we have Cristina Frias. Please come to the stage. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. These are introductions, of course, for artistic giants. I am going to just read a few more lines from their official bios. I know we're anxiously awaiting to have them join us on the stage. So what I would like to do is welcome Dr. Jorge Huerta and Mr. Luis Valdez. I think it's more exciting to actually see them as we're talking about them, right? So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Jorge Huerta. He is Chancellor's Associate Professor of Theater Emeritus from UC San Diego, a leading authority on contemporary Chicano, and U.S. Latino theater, who has lectured throughout the United States, Latin America, and Western Europe. He has published many articles and reviews and has edited 3 collections of plays. Professor Huerta published the first book about Chicano Theater, Themes and Forms, in 1982. Yes, right? His book, Chicano Drama, Society, Performance, and Myth, was published by Cambridge University Press in late 2000. He has been given a Lifetime Achievement Award in Educational Theater from the Association for Theater in Higher Learning. I can go on and on about the accolades and awards, but let's just give a round of applause to Dr. Huerta. And we'll learn more about him in the conversation. He has directed internationally and nationally as well. And now to our esteemed guest that we also heard a lot about already, but it's important, I think, we know some of the details. Mr. Luis Valdez, the author of the book, is regarded as one of the most important and influential American playwrights living today. Valdez's international renown and Obie Award-winning theater company, El Teatro Campesino, the Farm Workers Theater, was founded in 1965 in the heat of the UFW struggle and the Great Delano Grape Strike in California's Central Valley. His involvement with Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, the UFW, and the early Chicano movement left an indelible mark that remains embodied in all his work even after he left the UFW in 1967. He is the recipient of multiple awards, most notably the College of Fellows of the American Theater at the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in DC inducted him. In 2007, he was awarded a Rockefeller Fellowship as one of the 50 U.S. artists so honored across the United States. And in 2016, he was awarded the National Medal of the Arts by President Obama at the White House. Mm-hmm. And in a few weeks, he will be awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award at the Mexican American Film Festival here in Los Angeles. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for indulging us. So you two have been lifelong collaborators, colleagues, friends, scholar, artists, honorary professor, directors, writers. Share with us your very, very early encounters with each other and your work together. Take us back to the beginning. How did you meet, Mr. Valdez?
How did we meet? Well, that's a good question. My earliest memories of Jorge are going to visit him when he was a graduate student at UC Santa Barbara. And I was looking really for someone who could reflect what we were doing in the field, but in a scholarly way. And once I met Jorge as a graduate student working on his PhD in Chicano theater, I mean, I knew I'd found not just a friend, but a colleague, because these are the first initial years of the Teatro Chicano. And it's not enough just to do the thing. You have to label it. You have to identify it. And you have to put it into books. We need publications. We need discussions, in order to make it real in not just the academic world, but also the professional world. And so I met him and I met his family. I met his wife, Ginger, and I met his boys, 2 boys. And I stayed over at their student apartment. I slept in the boys' room. And we had wonderful discussions. We were just at the beginning of something But I knew that it was a collaboration that was going to take a lot of years to completely flower into what we were talking about. And I found him to be extremely intelligent, focused, disciplined, and of course he was a first Chicano doctorate, you know, in Chicano theater. So all of those are qualities that enhanced what I was doing in the raw field. You know, again, El Teatro Campesino was evolving on the spur. It was evolving in the middle of the movement. It was part of the farm workers' strike. And so there was no time to really reflect on what we were doing. But Jorge brought that reflection. And for that, I'm eternally grateful that we've been lifelong friends since then.
Thank you. And it's true. When we met, and I was in the first year of my PhD studies in theater, not in Chicano theater, there was no degree in Chicano theater. We were the first Chicanos to teach at a university. He at Cal State Fresno, he taught the first course in Chicano theater there, so he beat me to that. But I go to Santa Barbara, and I met him, and I said, Mr. Valdez, I'm a PhD student. I want to write about Chicano theater. What do I do? Where do I go? And he said with his wonderful, I call it radio voice, study the Maya, study the Azteca. So I studied the Maya and I studied the Azteca, and I realized that we had deep, deep roots as theater people, as artists, as musicians, as dancers, as poets. We've been raised to think that the Indios were savages, but they were not savages. They were our ancestors, and you saw a taste of it today. What a thrill to have the Concheros here. That fits so well. I wish we could take them on a bus with us everywhere we go, because it's a wonderful way to get involved in the book that you're going to hear about. So that's how it is. If I hadn't met him, and if I hadn't seen the Teatro Campesino in 1968 as a high school drama teacher, I wouldn't be here. I would not be here, because this collaboration has been extremely wonderful, and we've changed the world in many ways. And so an honor to be next to this man, and he's honored to be next to me, I tell you.
And we're both honored to be here with you.
Yes.
You know, yes. It is a collaboration that's not shared between two people. It is a collaboration that now extends into hundreds, perhaps thousands now of Latinos, Latinas, you know, that are involved in the evolution of our theater within the American theater, and changing American theater as we go. I've always thought of it as a political community organizing effort. It still is to this very day, and everyone that enlists their talents and dedicates their skills to creating new plays and new stagings of our own reality is part of that collaboration, part of that movement. I embrace it all.
Thank you. Thank you. What an honor to have our wise, trailblazing elders with us today. You mentioned, Dr. Huerta, a little bit about the first time you saw Teatro Campesino. You were a high school teacher. Mr. Valdez, can you share your first moment where you experienced theater in your early life that changed you, that perhaps inspired you to imagine a life as a storyteller?
Well, I've written my autobiography, which is due to be published, you know, within a year and a half or so. And the title is The Monkey Mask, a memoir. And the reason I call it The Monkey Mask is because that is the point of origin of my obsession with theater. I always tell this story. I'll try to paraphrase it. I don't know how many of you have heard it before, but I was a migrant farm worker in my earliest incarnation with my family. Actually, my dad had the ranch of a Japanese American farmer that had been sent to a concentration camp with his family. So World War II was stable, but after World War II, the price supports that kept my dad's ranch going were gone. And so we were back on the migrant path by the time I was 6, and 1946. And we're up close to Cupertino and picking cotton in a big cotton camp. And I didn't realize at the time what the reality was, but there were a lot of unemployed people in 1946. It's after the war, the vets are coming back. The Japanese had been released from the camps. African Americans were streaming into the West Coast looking for work. And so there were a lot of available farm workers, you know, and the cotton fields were the place where they all went. They concentrated in and around Corcoran, which is now Tulare Lake in California. And we were there in a labor camp that had literally thousands of people during the cotton season. And then within a month, all the cotton had been picked, and we couldn't move on because my dad's pickup had broken down. And so we were fishing to food. We're eating out of the San Joaquin River. You know, it was, my mother would make tortillas, and my brother and I and my dad would go fish, and that's how we were eating, you know, fish tacos before they were trendy, you know. But then one morning, early in the morning, I fell into the river and I almost drowned. And so my mother got really scared and she said, maybe you and your brother better go to school. So we went to a nearby school, a little place called Stratford, not Stratford on Avon, Stratford on the San Joaquin. You know? And so I knew we weren't going to be there for very long. And so really I just focused on my lunch, you know, which was a little brown paper bag that my mother got at the camp store. Paper bags were at a premium then. It's after there were still paper shortages in 1946. So she used to make the tacos and put them in the bag, and I used to put it under my jacket and go to school. As the warmth of Mama's tacos, you know. And at lunch, I mean, we'd pull out, there was no cafeteria, we'd all eat our lunches. So I'd save the bag to take it back to her every day. And one afternoon, it was gone. I couldn't find my bag, and the teacher saw me running around como loco and said, what are you looking for? And I told her, oh, a little brown paper bag. She says, I took it. And then she escorted me into a back room, and my bag was all ripped up and floating in a basin of water. And I thought she'd gone crazy. Said, well, you're loca la maestra, you know? So I reached in, grabbed a piece of, she grabbed in a piece of the bag. She dipped it into some paste and then put it on a mold that I had noticed for the first time. It was a face, it was a monkey. And she put another piece on it and smoothed it out, another piece, she smoothed it out. She said, you want to try it? I said, okay. And so I went for the bag and I got the piece and smoothed it out, another piece. And I realized at that moment, one of the secrets of the universe, it's called paper mache. and she was making a mask, but it was already November. I knew that it's too late for Halloween. What is this for? She said, it's for a play. The whole school's involved, even the 8th graders in the school band. It's Christmas in the Jungle. It's our Christmas play, and we need 2 first graders to play monkeys. So I forgave her about the bag, and I auditioned, you know. And I got my first role in the theater. I got to be a monkey, you know. And she made a wonderful mask out of my mama's taco bag. She made me a costume that was better than my own clothes, you know, little green pants and a red vest and a tail, una cola, you know, and then the mask, you know. And I was in heaven, man. I was going to have my debut before the world. And the week of the show, which was supposed to be on a Friday, I came home on a Tuesday or something, and my mother said, we're leaving tomorrow. And I said, but Mom, the play's on Friday. And she said, I know, but we're being evicted. And so the next morning, my dad got the truck started somehow, and we left the labor camp and went through the town of Stratford as it receded into the San Joaquin Valley fog, and I felt this hole opening up in my chest, and I felt that it could have destroyed me, you know. But I've always believed that a negative can be turned into a positive. And so what happened is I took with me the secret of paper mache. I could make masks. I took with me my unrequited love of the theater, and also residual anger because we had been evicted from the labor camp. Approximately 20 years later, I went to Cesar Chavez and pitched him an idea of a theater of, by, and for farm workers. Because that hole in my chest that opened up became the hungry mouth of my creativity. And for over 70 some years now, I have been pouring plays and poems and stories. The whole is screenplays. It's still there, but it goes all the way back to the monkey mask. And that's why I've titled my autobiography, The Monkey Mask, a Memoir.
Wow.
You can look for it in the bookstores in a couple of years, okay?
Yeah. We'll have another talk then, okay?
It'll be the 60th anniversary of the Grape Strike is when it's coming out in 2025.
Wow.
All right.
Perfect.
Thank you.
You want my story? I did not play a monkey.
But you look like a monkey.
I was born around the corner in Boyle Heights, grew up in Cypress Park. All right. And so, as you know, who were there, you know, it was a mixed neighborhood that we were in, but nonetheless, my mother had a good friend whose son played a Mexican kid in the movies in Hollywood. He had an agent in the age, he had grown up, and La Señora Alvarado said, do you know anybody, to my mom, that might want to be an actor? Well, I raised my hand, so they sent me to La Señora, which she was Anglo, Mrs. Lola Moore. And so she put me out there, and I acted professionally on television in the 1950s, when your great-grandparents were watching TV on a screen this big. I tell people I spent the early 50s on a 12-inch screen in black and white, wearing huaraches and pajamas and a broken hat. I was always the cute little, operative word, cute little Mexican, okay? So that was my introduction to the professional world of film, and it was harsh because I did not work that often, but it was an exciting thing. So that, you know, and we had always done, like him, we did plays in the backyard. We all thought we were stars. My family, like his, were very creative, and they encouraged us to do these things. So,
Thank you, thank you. I remember seeing an interview that Dan Guerrero did with you, and I believe there was a story about you having the special skill of ventriloquism. Was that part of that same period of time?
Yeah, the secret of paper mache taught me not only to make masks, but also to make puppets. And so I was able to make puppets early on, you know, 6, 7, 8 years old. And I put on puppet shows in my grandfather's garage, and I charged too. Someone came up to just a couple of years ago and said, hey, I paid my nickel. I used to see your puppet place. But the fact is that that led to the whole idea of puppets. And then a friend of mine loaned me actually a Jerry Mahoney dummy, you know, which became mine eventually. And I put a mustache on it, and a little hat, and said cool cat, you know. It was a bit of a pachuco, but he was an Anglo, you know. So he had to be a cool Anglo, and he was my Anglo alter ego. And I called him Allie Nelson. And eventually I realized I had to have a Mexican counterpart. And so I made a balsa wood dummy that I called Marcelino Pipin. And so when I was in high school, I had 2 dummies, and one sat on this knee and the other one sat, and then they would argue, you know, and I'd say, no se peleen, don't fight, guys, you know. And so it was my alter ego on both sides. On the one side, my Anglo side, and on the other side, my Mexican side, you know. And this became a great way for me to work out a lot of anxieties when I was a teenager. And the thing is that when I was 16, we were living in San Jose, and they opened up the new television station, Channel 11, which is now the NBC affiliate in the Bay Area. And they needed a half hour in Spanish, FCC regulations, only a half hour on Sunday. And I was on the inaugural broadcast for 5 minutes of a half-hour show with live music and my 2 dummies. And they liked it so much, they invited me back. And so I was on that show for as long as it lasted, 18 weeks on Sunday. My family was living on a dirt street, you know, in San Jose, in Salsipuedes. But I was on television, you know, with my 2 dummies. And after I graduated from high school, I decided to move on. So I left the dummies at home, and with my brother Daniel, you know, Danny Valdez, you may know him. But he, I don't know what he did with it. I think he sold them for grass or something. But that's another story altogether. But yes, I was a ventriloquist, and it was my first professional experience. I was 16, but there was an art director, and they used to make sets for me. And it was live television, black and white cameras. And I realized, you know, I can do this. I can do this as a way of life. I just didn't know how I was going to do it. But I had been performing in the labor camps to a captive audience with my dummies. And I realized I can not only do the ventriloquist act in labor camps, I can also do theater. I can do plays. And that was sort of the beginnings of my realization that a teatro campesino was a possibility. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's like you say in the book, do what you can do.
Do what you can do, exactly. It's acting is about doing what you can, not faking it, but do what you can do. And everybody can do something. Start there. Start with what you can do and build on it. You lay a foundation, it's like building a house, and then on top of that is the next layer and the next layer. But you work on your skills as an actor. And an actor is someone who does, not someone who fakes, someone who does something. Okay?
Yes, thank you.
We'll come around to that.
Yes. So we're going to get to the slides. I have one more question, Dr. Huerta, regarding, the history of the teatro. You've written so much. And can you share with us, why do you think the Chicano Latino community in the 1970s chose theater as a vehicle for expression? And how did Luis Valdez and Teatro Campesino particularly influence?
Yeah, I mean, I credit Luis with having founded the Chicano theater movement. And from that, they started performing in the fields, and then they started performing at colleges. They performed at Stanford, I think was your first performance as the Campesino, and he and I did this at Stanford right before the pandemic. So we returned to Stanford. But what happened was he put out the book, the Octo book, that had wonderful, wonderful pieces to perform that anybody could do. Anybody can act, anybody can perform. And so people would see the Teatro Campesino. They were touring university campuses across the country, and other Chicanas and Chicanos mainly would see what they were doing, and they started their own teatros. And so by 1971, we formed El Teatro Nacional de Aztlán, the National Theater of Aztlán, Aztlán being the Nahuatl word for where we are, the north of Mexico. And that was a very important part of the movement, because when I went to Santa Barbara, I inherited a teatro. It's called Teatro Mecha, and Mecha means match, and it was a part of the national organization, Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán, Chicano Theater Movement of Aztlán. It exists to this day, and in fact, I don't know that I've said this. I haven't said it on this tour, but when I got to Santa Barbara because I had applied and I had all the qualifications. I had my BA, my MA, I had taught at high school, junior college. And they said there was no room, and 6 Chicanos, it was all run. The movement, unfortunately, back then was run by the machos. And so the 6 machos marched into the chair of the department, who later became my advisor, and I owe my life to him. And they said, what do you mean you don't have room? We hear that this Jorge Huerta has all of the degrees, They found room. So I'm here because of this man, because of Mecha, having had the nerve, It's a long story, but the most important thing is that, look at us. We are in a public college where the president is a Chicano. The vice presidents are Chicanas and Chicanos. So I like to say we've come a long way, baby. And my role as a scholar was, as he says, write about it. So I have been, and that's how we became close. Ginger, my wife, and I founded Teatro de la Esperanza that year, one of the first leading teatros, Teatro de la Esperanza, the Theater of Hope. Now you can applaud. Thank you. Either you're 75 years old and know who Teatro de la Esperanza is, or you read my book. So thank you. You've been reading, you've been taking the class. Anyway, so we founded a movement, and it was very much a part of, back to your question, how did we recreated the movement. We gave the movement art, we gave the movement poetry, song. They created songs about the movement, about the farm workers, and so there was a place for us. And here we are today.
Well, it was the times, right? I mean, you're talking the 1960s, and more specifically, the year 1964. I think we're there again. This year and next year, I think we're there again. And if you live long enough, you get to see the waves. I talk about it in the book, the wave principle. And it's a question of time, and it's a question of people. We're made of blood and bone, and none of us live forever. But the waves of humanity, the waves of generations keep coming. They can't be stopped. They keep coming. And so I recall very vividly the early 60s, when there was no Chicano theater, there was no Chicano movement. I was anti-Vietnam War, I was, becoming politically involved in whatever I could. I went to Cuba in 1964 to protest the travel ban. That Chicanized the hell out of me, by being in Cuba, meeting Che, playing baseball with Fidel. But it was like going to the moon. We had to go all the way to Europe. We had to go to Prague, Czechoslovakia, fly to Paris, and then Czechoslovakia in order to catch the plane, Aviación, Cuba, La Cubana de Aviación, right? And to fly back 40 hours in the air to get to Cuba. But the fact is that things were formulating, in the 1960s that were part of the civil rights movement, that were part of the women's movement, that were part of the gay movement. All these movements had their seeds in the early 1960s, and the Chicano movement was no different. We saw ourselves reflected in the African-American civil rights movement, and we weren't the only one. The Filipinos got involved. I mean, it was a lot of people saw themselves in that wind that was kicking up and became a part of that wave then. And so the political aspect of what we were doing is absolutely essential, and it continues to be essential. And these waves come and go, but there come peak moments, and it hits a new generation, and they grab it and go with it. And so the birth of Chicano theater was part of that wave. The Teatro Campesino was just an example of what could be done with really nothing. You turn a negative into a positive. Our aesthetic became rascuachismo, work with what you have, do what you can do. If you have a rag, use the rag. Right? You have a stick, use the stick, In other words, you don't need to wait until conditions are perfect. But if you do work on it, like a lot of people that have been marching and demonstrating for 75 years, that led to the creation of ELAC. It was that kind of effort that then gives us the institutions that we need to kick into the next 75 years. And so it's all part of the wave principle, and it's all part of regenerating the essence of what we all do, which is to try to save our own people, to try to help each generation to discover themselves and to discover their own power. That is the seed of El Teatro Campesino and of the Chicano theater in general.
Thank you.
I think this is a nice moment to transition into Theater of the Sphere, which is the conceptual framework for Luis Valdez's theory and acting practice rooted in Mayan mathematics and physics. You do write in the book that when you join Cesar Chavez to organize on the picket lines, you had no idea we tap into the genetic memory of the ancestors. And I think you've already shared a little bit about that, but I think that's a opening for you to maybe talk about that and share some of the slides.
Some of the slides, yeah. Well, identity, one of the things that the theater and the arts can do is that you can identify yourself, give yourself a name. Poets are the namers of names, and playwrights are poets in that sense. That someone has to come up with the names that congeal a vague bunch of impressions into a really visible idea. And the idea of becoming Chicano was something that has been generating for many generations. The Pachucos advanced it considerably in the 1940s, but it was there before from the immigrant workers, from the turn of the 20th century. Used to call themselves Chicanos, And so in the 1960s, we took that idea and elevated it even more by politicizing it and say it's going to be our name that we choose because we're proud of who we are and because we acknowledge our roots in the indigenous universe, That's like when I was a kid, farm workers were just farm workers. They were pescadores. We weren't even campesinos. We couldn't afford that word, Campesino is something that came from Mexico, but once Cesar started to use it in the context of the farm worker struggle, suddenly becoming a campesino was very deep and very broad and very human, and it was dignifying. As a matter of fact, I remember standing on the picket lines in the grape strike, and I told the workers out in the field, come out because es para la dignidad de ustedes. And I was saying, lo que queremos es dignidad para nuestro pueblo. And so there was a campesino standing there, and he came after I had spoken, and he came, oye, can I ask you something? I said, what do you need? ¿Qué es dignidad? He didn't know the word. And I said, well, respeto para ti mismo. You respect yourself. That's your dignity. But anyway, the naming of names. But I realized that campesino doesn't say it all. It's deeper than that. It's not enough to say you're colonized, because then you remain colonized. You got to keep going. You got to keep digging all the way to your basic roots. And even though we come from 1,000 different tribes in Mexico and Mesoamerica, what the Mayan concept does, it unifies it all. You know, it's like the Greeks, you know, they gave us definition. And so I in my quest for Chicano identity, I found myself going deeper and deeper and deeper into our origins and into our heritage. And I could do this. I was a math and physics major, you know, my first year in college. I loved math and I loved physics. I loved the sciences, but I knew there was a greater need for the arts because the sciences were riddled with racism. You know, you couldn't go into engineering without encountering racism against Mexicans or blacks or whatever, and still there in some ways. So I'm very supportive of anybody going into the sciences. Please do. But you find that you're going to be fighting. So the most direct way to fight that racism to me was to use the arts, use the theater to attack it directly. But even then, though, the goal was to go to the root. And the root, as it turns out, is mathematical, it's philosophical, and it is very natural. In the same way that the Greeks defined the human body in stone, and everybody admires Greek sculptures, you know. They're perfect. They're anatomically correct. Before that, ancient cultures were all over the place in terms of how they represented the human body. China had some wonderful statues. And also the Maya had some wonderful genetically accurate representations of the human body. So what my ideas led me to is a description of the human being that is more accurate. And it's scientifically based in a Mayan sense, but it's also very artistic and very poetic because that's what the Mayas were. They were poetic at the same time, not to say religious, they were poetic at the same time that they were scientific. And so they left us some very important clues. And in my search as a Chicano, I discovered some things along the way. El maestro Domingo Martinez Paredes in Mexico City, who died in the 80s, but we met him in the 70s when we were in Mexico. And his books opened up that world for me, which led eventually to the Vibrant Being, Theater of the Sphere, the Vibrant Being. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you. Nancy, we have the slides here just behind us.
Okay, there you are. Now, you got to understand, this is Cuatro Movimiento. This is Hunab-Hu, el único dador de la medida y el movimiento. And this is how they represented it. It's a yin-yang, but it's the Mayan yin-yang. But you have to see it in 3 dimensions, okay? Not 2 dimensions. You got to see it like the soccer ball in 3 dimensions, the sphere, because we are all a sphere. And this is the key to our true nature. So as we go into the images, what's the next image?
Nancy, the next image.
There you see some representations of Hunab-Ku. The circle and the square is their image of Hunab-Ku, el único dador de la medida y el movimiento. And so the circle is roughly a feminine creative creature, or being, and the square is the masculine. And so it's yin-yang work together. And it's also mathematical because it breaks down in terms of numbers, 360 degrees and 260 days of the sacred calendar. The square represents the sacred calendar. The circle is the solar calendar. That's why the Mayas had 2 calendars. And I'll come to that. But the ceremonial centers, you know, we talk about the theater, but it's just enough to talk about the box that represents modern theater and the proscenium. You got to talk about the ceremonial centers that existed in 400 cities of stone in Mesoamerica. And they were all based on the Hunab-Ku concept. You can see the pyramids. They were almost roughly in this shape. They were in the jungle, but they're much bigger. They're discovering they were much bigger than people assumed. You know, these were cities of 100,000 people in some instances. And then over here, you have the circle in the square, which is also the reverse. It can happen. We can move on to the next one. And this is a representation of the ball game, a ball player. And you can see that he's kicking a ball with a head in it. It wasn't literally a human head, but if you were sacrificed in the ball court, because it was not just theater, it was not just athletics, it was also religion. And so if you won, you could still be beheaded. But they took these heads and they turned them to dust, they burned them. And then they mixed that with the rubber. And so sometimes the greatest players ended up becoming rubber balls. Now, here's the thing you got to understand. The word hule in Spanish means rubber. That comes from the Nahuatl Aztec word olin, which means movement. Nahui olin is for movement. So hule represents something that is very special. Only the Maya had it at the beginning because they had the rubber tree and they were able to take the resin. They found a way to vulcanize it with another plant, another root. It wasn't B.F. Goodrich that vulcanized rubber, okay? It was the Maya who did it. And because they were able to do that, they developed rubber balls. And these rubber balls could bounce. No other ball in the world could bounce. They had balls that were made out of leather, made out of wood. They were made of whatever they could find, you know, around the world because the ball was universal. But only the Maya had rubber balls. And what the Maya understood is that reality vibrates. That reality at the base has vibration. And that's, you know, that you can corroborate that scientifically now that there's intense vibration happening in your body. But they began to understand it way back when, 2,000 years ago, and make it part of their philosophy. We can move on. And this is the ball game, yeah. And again, Hunabku, the square and the circle, we can move on. Okay, 2 calendars. The sacred calendar of 260 days links up with the solar calendar of 365 days. 360 days plus 5 days that were dead, so to speak. But in order to understand where you are in time, you have to ratchet these 2 calendars together. Now, interestingly, 260 days is approximately 9 months. The time that we spend in mother's wombs is the key to the sacred calendar. And these 2 ratchet together to tell you more or less where you are. So that in order to establish a date, the Mayas had 2 dates, one on the sacred calendar and one on the solar calendar. Now, we took the sacred calendar of 260 days and broke it down. I broke it down in the Vibrant Being as a guide, really, to learn how to act, okay? Act not just on the stage, but how to act in life. Okay, moving on. So here you have the 2 calendars. The Tzolk'in on the right is the sacred calendar. The Ha'ab is the solar calendar on the left. And this is how they interact. I took the 20 hieroglyphs of the sacred calendar and broke them down into a system of movement, okay? Again, I'm guided by the ideas of Maestro Domingo Martinez Paredes, who was Maya, a Maya Yucateco from Yucatan. And so I wasn't just, you know, blowing air in a vacuum. I was connecting to a true maestro in Mexico who was drummed out of the UNAM, the University Nacional de Mexico, because he was very critical of the British and American scholars that would come and pretend to know everything about the Maya when he could tell them that they were messing up because they didn't speak the language. He spoke the language. That was the difference. Okay, moving on. The 20 days of the Mayan sacred calendar, 13 months of 20 days each for 260 days. Now, all of these are 4 columns. Imish ikakbal kanchik chankimi maniknamat luk okchuen ebben ishmen kib kaban snab kawakahau. So we have 4 columns, and these are the square in the circle. Each of those is one of those bars. And the bar in Maya, in the Mayan mathematical system, is the number 5. So each of these columns has 5 points. Imish ik akbal kan chikchan, that's the body. Himi banik lamat muluk ok, that is the heart. Chuen eb ben ish men, that is the mind. And Kib kaban isnab kawak how, that's your morality, that's your ethos. What's interesting here is that if you studied Aristotle, and if you go into the theater, they'll go to the Greeks, if you study Greek drama, and they talk about the three basic principles that Aristotle defined as necessary for good drama. And he talks about pathos, logos, and ethos. You may have heard these terms. Pathos is of course, the heart. It's connecting to your emotions. A play must connect to emotions. Logos is your reason, your logos. And then ethos is the morality. Now, Carl Jung, the German-American psychologist, developed the fourth column, which he called eros, because Aristotle didn't deal with the body. But eros then becomes first column, the body, and then pathos becomes the heart, logos is the mind, and then ethos is morality. The last column, which is really interesting, has to do with believing in something greater than yourself. As you evolve in your life, you have to believe in something that isn't going to die with you. And this is where your belief in family and community and nation comes to bear, is that you have to have that belief in order to do the fourth column, which is the morality column. We're all moral, in that sense. And what that leads to is eventually is the concept of ELAC, which is what the Mayans developed again as their moral basic principle. You are my other me. Tú eres mi otro yo. Si te amo y te respeto a ti, me amo y me respeto yo. If I love and respect you, I love and respect myself. Si te hago daño a ti, me hago daño a mí. If I do harm to you, I do harm to myself. That's a very high moral standard. We don't live in that time right now. We live in a time of great immorality. We have a former president of the United States on trial for rape, and for some reason, the world isn't burning up with rage. What's going on? We have Supreme Court justices that are cheating and enriching and engorging themselves. And yet, the other political party, the Republican Party, that is responsible for those judges, is quiet and silent about that. It seems as if we have entered a tremendously difficult time in this world now. And we're fighting for basic principles. The Maya would be outraged, they would be horrified to know that these things are happening in the world. They were so concerned about birth and babies that they would plan when to get pregnant, because the stars had to line up. They were trying to live a very moral life. Next. The 20 footprints then break down into the body, the heart, the mind, the spirit. And again, zero, the power of zero, their zero, the idea of Mayan zero is a sphere. And it is really a spiral. That's why they had the concha. We had the concheros over here. The concha is the symbol of zero for the Mayas because it's a spiral. And this is a spiral too. It's inside. And we are all spirals. I've got my mic on, so I can't take this off, But actually, when we teach the Vibrant Being Workshop, what you're doing is you're unlocking your body because we're made up of spirals. And it doesn't matter what the dance tradition is. It can be ballet, or it can be rock and roll, or it can be hip hop. It's the same body. And so once you discover that you vibrate and that you spiral, you discover then that how we're connected to the basic principles of the universe. The Mayas described it in their sacred calendar. What I have done with the theater sphere, this is the sphere, is I have taken the 20 footprints and broken them down into exercises for the body, the heart, the mind, and the soul, or the spirit. Okay, moving on. And Oh, back up again, please. Sorry. At the bottom, it says motion, emotion, notion, and vibration. So the idea of the vibrant being is you unleash your vibrant being by becoming yourself, by focusing and centering in yourself, bodily, emotionally, intellectually, and then eventually morally. The moral aspect is very important. This is why Chicano theater is really political theater. We don't do it for the money. At least we shouldn't do it for the money, not the money alone. The money's okay, but we shouldn't do it. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to deprive anybody of a livelihood. You know, it's amazing that we can make a living by being artists, but that's not the point. The point isn't to put up and tell stories just to make money. The point is to tell stories in order to improve life for everybody, so everybody gets to understand each other better. That's the point behind Chicano theater. Okay.
Could I interrupt?
Yes.
I'm
Sorry.
Just a moment. Yeah.
I'm gonna get my compañero here.
So fast. I just hope he doesn't ask me to do anything with that ball, because one of the exercises is to balance on the ball, but you can't be my age and do that. But about theater, about Chicano theater, there's two things that I want to share with you. In the early 70s, when we were forming TENAS, we had a meeting at UC Santa Barbara, Esperanza Campesino, and young people from other parts of the state to learn, you know, from him and his people. And somebody said, Mr. Valdez, because the Chicano movement was very, very militant, very political. You had to be political, and it was a very nationalistic movement. It was too much. Nonetheless, somebody asked him, Mr. Valdez, if a Chicano paints a vase of flowers on a canvas, picture this, is it political? And he immediately responded, yes, because that Chicano or Chicana had the time to paint that vase of flowers. And that was a part of the, thank you. And that was a part of the movement. The murals were an important part. And their center, your first center, had the first Chicano murals at the side door, the one in Del Rey. The Campesino spawned so many wonderful things. The other point about what you were just saying in terms of political, I edited an anthology of plays, and I called it Necessary Theater. Plays about the Chicano experience.
Excellent book. Yeah.
And in that I have his first play and other plays, and people still use that term. Our theater is necessary. It's necessary for all the reasons that this system is pointing out. It's complex. You can't pick it up in one. I've been watching this for how many times have we done this, right? And I have the book. I wrote the introduction. It's wonderful. And no, nonetheless, it's extremely important because I am a director as well.
Yes, you are.
Well, and the introduction puts it on a human basis, right?
Well, who is this man?
Yeah.
And what I talk about, and I don't even talk about films, we talk about the plays, but he's not only a theater person, he's a film person, a video person, a music, you know, it's just incredible.
I'll tell you what's interesting about the connection between theater and film, you know, because I've been asked, how did you make the leap? You know, you're the guy that used to do plays on flatbed trucks. How did you end up in Hollywood? Well, it's the basic principles. Again, it's dealing with theater of the sphere, that when you're making a movie and you're out with 35 millimeter cameras and stuff, you are in the great sphere of reality, you know. You have to plan your shots according to the whole reality around you. And the first thing you have to learn as a director is to where you're going to place your camera, where you're going to put your shots, how is that going to connect to the next scene. But you're working in a sphere, the world. You're out there in reality, and so knowing how to plan your shots in a movie out in reality is no different than learning how to plan your shots on a flatbed truck. I mean, they're related because it's the infinitesimal with the infinite. You know, it's connected. But the idea then is that you can take these principles and apply them to life, to art and to life, because this is the heritage that the Mayan civilization left us. You know, their tragedy also, the disappearance should not be lost on anybody, but they're discovering more and more how important and how big those cities were. And they're beginning to surmise that maybe civilization began in the tropics, began in the jungle, and then moved out from there, right? We're so used to hearing that civilization began in the Middle East, And again, we're grateful for the cow and the chicken and the goat, all of that, Cordero de Dios, and all of that coming from the Middle East. But in the Maya highlands, they had different things. They had fruit, they had vegetables, they had the corn god, and we talk about sacrificing Jesus, as el Cordero de Dios, because that's oriented to the Holy Land in Jerusalem. The corn god among the Maya is associated with rebirth, that when you die, you go to the corn god and you want to be reborn like a corn plant. So it's a very different approach to the idea of regeneration and self-sacrifice. And it bears a lot of study. I don't completely understand it. I'm doing the work of an artist here. I'm taking these gestalt jumps to try to understand my own heritage with the little lifetime that's been given to me. But I expect these ideas will go rolling on into new generations, and that more people will come and discover and uncover what has been hidden for so long, for too long. We're not meant to be colonized. We're not meant to be beasts of burden. We're not meant to be criminalized. We're not meant to be victimized. We're free, God-given, generous spirits that can create their own reality. And we can go anywhere. We can go into the sciences. We can go into medicine. We can go to the arts. The ball game, again, 400 cities of stones with ball courts, every one of them. And I used to go to Mexico. I'd say, Mexico City is not going to find itself until they reconstruct the ball court in the middle of the Zócalo, where it belongs. And that day is coming, because there are people now working on the recreation of the ball game, not just for tourists, but also for its true significance and what it meant. And those ball courts are all over in all of the archaeological sites. You find them, But Mexico City had its own, and it's going to be found there. Anyway, you can see how the ball was played by the ancients, and it's now played by campesinos in Mexico, particularly in Michoacán and Sinaloa, where they play ulama with the rubber ball. And it's a sport that is growing in speed. It's a sport that will recapture the significance of what that ball game meant to the Maya. And it's the grandfather of all the ball games, because it's the rubber ball. Okay, and then moving on. We work with number 5 or number 4 soccer balls, but this is the key. And you can actually do this. I need to put in a little commercial here of sorts. We are offering, I'm not offering, but the Vibrant Being Workshop is being offered at Studio Luna in East LA. And I need to introduce 2 people here, well, 3 people actually. One is my compañera and wife of 54 years, my co-writer and collaborator, Lupe Trujillo Valdez. Stand up, Lupe. Woo! And the other is my son Lakin and his compañera Maya Malan Gonzalez. They're married, but they are conducting the Vibrant Being Workshop at Studio Luna, and where you can look it up right online, Maya.
And talk to me too, any of our actors here. I have all the information, and we're talking also about eventually offering one here at ELAC. So
it isn't enough just to talk about it. You have to do it. Like what Jorge was saying, you can take a couple of weeks to do it and really get into it. It can transform you. It can help, because these ideas coming again from the ancients. And I think we have some more. Yeah, these are the final pictures here that where you actually get on the ball, literally balance on the ball to the point where you can squat and get up. It takes a lot of doing, and it takes a lot of people to spot you so that you don't fall and break your ankles. But the fact is that it's a skill that will give you an equilibrium that will last for the rest of your life. It is something that you need as you get older. It helps when you start falling a lot. It helps if you know how to roll, when you see. And I think one more picture after this. There it is. This is the maestro, Domingo Martinez Paredes, the maestro yucateco, who through his books, El idioma maya hablado y escrito, Un continente y una cultura, so many, Hunabku, Síntesis del Pensamiento Maya. He's the one that introduced me to Pensamiento Serpentino, which is the wave principle. I have taken it a little bit further for my own purposes, but I don't think that he would disapprove. He was a true maestro with a great sense of humor, and it's too bad that he died relatively young, I think in his early 80s. But the fact is that after he was drummed out of the UNAM because of his conflicts with the anthropologists and the archaeologists that were coming from England and the US, he earned his living by as an escribano, writing letters for the unlettered in Mexico. And his living room was his office, and it was wall-to-wall books, his paperback books. Domingo Martinez Paredes. Isidro Macías, the Chicano poet and playwright, has published a primer based on his books in English. So you can look for that too. Isidro Macías, look him up with a Y.
Okay.
He's an old Chicano playwright from Tenaz, also from the old days. But he met Domingo Martinez Paredes as well. So that's it. That is a celebration of a maestro. We need maestros to pass the torch. Some of you are very young, but it's your destiny to become maestros. We must become maestros to the young that are following after us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's not personal. Students have to go to class. Some of them are going to class, but how are we on time?
1:29.
Okay. So there's so many questions that I still have, but I know that our community has questions as well. So hopefully we'll ask some of the questions that I still would ask. So I believe we have microphones out in the house. If you would like to ask a question, raise your hand and someone will bring you the mic.
Right there.
Someone here, okay.
And we thank everyone for joining us. There is cafecito and pan outside waiting for you. But we will continue a few more minutes here with questions. Okay.
Hello, good afternoon. How are you? My name is Jorge Huerta. I've been so inspired by your work, Luis Valdez. And I've taken like a lot of what you said in like your books to like, and I brought it to my own community of Kona. And as like first generation Chicanos, people that like imigrantes, like my dad, he's jardinero. And since I was 12, I would work with him in jardin, doing landscaping and stuff like that. So by default, I'm jardinero too. And you know, when I do a lot of my theater work and when I read your work and see how a lot of your influence came from building working class solidarity and doing this work from an authentic point of view. And the moment you realize when you want to become an artist and nothing else in your life will make you happy, but then also being from a working class immigrant family, how did your parents react when you told them, yeah, quiero ser un director or artista, you know, because like with my dad, he's like, oh, con eso vas a hacer dinero? And like, that's the thing, you know, we as Chicano artists, you know, we still have to live in that duality of like, this is something I want to do, but like, I also want to make my family proud and be financially stable because that's why they came over here for. And like, it's a lot, it's just tough to be a working class artist, you know, and trying to do whatever you can to make space, but also being authentic to yourself and to what you want to create. And not just for you, but for your community at the end of the day. But yeah, I guess my question is, how do you tell your parents that?
You tell them in English.
You tell them what?
In English, que usan inglés.
Tell them in English.
I'm joking. my whole career as a teacher and a scholar has been in settings like this. And when a student says to me, I want to do theater, but my parents are not excited about it. You said it. You have to do something you love. Don't go into a field simply because somebody tells you to do it. I don't know the number of students that I have met over these many years of teaching at a university, children of medical doctors. It's unreal. It's fine. It's the family business, but nonetheless, there are also children of teatristas. We're looking at them, Kinan and esta, Maya, I'm sorry, are products of a teatro life. Okay, but they just did a study. The National Latino Theater Initiative has many dollars to fund the evolution, the further growth of the Latinx theater movement in the US and in Puerto Rico. They listed 150 teatros that were identified. Now, you know that all of those teatros are not supporting people, but they are doing an incredible thing. One thing that you can do is go into education with theater. What she's doing here, what she has done with that production of Electricidad that I saw last year and blew me away, and the students were wonderful. The audiences was like yourselves, very, very involved. We have given you a face, We don't see our faces publicly very much. So we have that obligation as artists and as teachers. And I can't tell you the number of students that I have had who got a boost by doing teatro, but then found themselves in medical school or in law school. You can imagine what our students, and we've all taught many people. You talk about thousands. I don't think it's thousands. With his movies, he has reached millions of people who have said, whoa, look at this. The play Zoot Suit that he directed in Mexico City con el Teatro Nacional, Limba, lasted a year. It was the most popular show, a live, wonderful, beautiful stage production in Espanol, por supuesto, in Mexico City, etc. So I don't know. Do you want to add to that anything that I don't?
Well, again, it depends on what your parents expect of you, and to some extent on what their dreams have been. My parents were happy if I could just get a job and work inside a building, I didn't have to work out in the fields, But I told my mother at one point, Mom, I want to become a nuclear physicist. And she said, ay, qué bien, mijito, está bien. And I said, later on, when I switched major, I said, Mom, I think I'm going to be a playwright. No, pues está bien, mijito. And when I got back from Cuba, I came back and visited my parents, and I was spouting all this stuff, coming out, talking about the revolution. And my mother's only comment was, bueno, si mi hijo es un comunista, yo también soy ahora. So it was really mother's love, it was good. It was good no matter what I did. But my beloved suegra used to say, los quiere uno por buenos y los quiere uno por malos, pero los quiere, about children. I think your parents love you because you're their child. So even if they may not approve, you have to do what's in your heart. You have to do what's important to you because it's your life. You're not living their life and they're not living yours. You have to live your own life. And so you have to do what you have to do. And I spoke to a lot of young people actually just last weekend, and I had a similar question. What do you tell young writers? And my advice to young people is protect the flame in your heart. Keep the flame alive. Don't sell it for money. Don't undermine it with things that you're not supposed to be doing, but you're doing. Don't drown it with drugs too much. Yeah, a little bit maybe, but not much. But the thing is, keep that flame alive, because that flame is what feeds you and your life and your power and your success. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think we have time for one more question.
We have one more question. Thank you. Right, thank you. I wanted to go back to the comment that you made about heritage and leaving a legacy. That's my concern for our young people. Do we have any kind of a national repository of our history, our language, our culture, what happened here in the United States, beginning in as early as the 16th, 17th century, where young people will be able to access these things because those of us who were part of the Chicano movement, we're slowly but surely leaving. And if the history dies with us, then what's going to happen? And I just want to know if you have thought about that or what we can do before the history leaves us if we don't have an access to it. Thank you.
Wow. Okay.
Well, there is material. There's a lot of stuff that talks about that. It's called, what is it? Critical race theory. And they're trying to eliminate critical race theory. My first book, which came out in 1982, Chicano Theater Themes and Forms, which is now out of print, but you can get in a library, was analyzed as a Marxist analysis. And I thought, well, there goes my tenure. I'll never go. I'm not a Marxist, but I understand the difference between the rich and the poor. I understand what oppression is. We see it, and it's getting worse and worse, and they're trying to take it away. Okay, so that term did not exist back then, but what it's called, in my thinking, critical race theory is our truth. And our truth is coming out here. When I started this as a scholar, there were no other PhD that had Chicanas or Chicanos Latin. Let's just stick to the Chicano communities back in the 70s. So the first Chicano to get a PhD in theater, I studied world theater, which helped, and he did too, and that's what helped us become what we became. But the number of people now, there were no books. The only book was his Actos. The second book was our Actos by Esperanza, and the third one was a couple of other. You cannot teach all of the plays that have been produced by our people, including the Afro-Latinos, the feminists have had a voice finally. The LGBT community finally has a voice. It's all out there, okay? And it's in both languages, but it's there. And I think what we need is more. The movement was very strong. I told you, 6 Chicanos marched into the chairman's office and said, hire that man. He's qualified. And he was cute. And so I'm sorry, I have to say it. You got to know,
I think that it depends on the life and death issues. And again, I think the wave is breaking again. For me, this is like 1964. Okay, the wave is about to break. 1965 is about to hit. And I saw evidence of it with respect to the presence of guns in our society. When high school students started to walk out, it reminded me of the high school walkout here in '68. But I think that high schoolers need to realize how much power they have. That in order to save their lives, they have to walk out of the classroom and demand that Congress do something to outlaw AK-40, AR-15. But it's kids fighting for their own lives. And I think nothing could be clear. Más claro no canta un gallo, It's our kids have to save themselves. This is my message. Teenagers, get out into the streets. Leave the classrooms. Don't go into schools until they outlaw guns that can get in there and kill you. It's that dire, it's that basic, it's that radical, okay? So if you know high schoolers, or some of you are high schoolers, but you're past high school, but the fact is that you can organize young people to do what needs to be done.
Yeah.
That is my advice. There's nothing wrong with political protest if it involves life and death issues, and I can't think of a bigger one right now than the presence of guns in our world right now, in our United States.
But
thank you.
1 minute. Most importantly, you can vote. You can vote. We have got to get those people out of the Congress, all of our state. Vote. That's your power. And walk out. Walk out and vote.
Thank you. Well, what a beautiful conversation. We invite everyone to join us after. We do have a presentation before we wrap up today, and I can't thank our guests enough again for spending their time, for their generosity of spirit and the wisdom that is here again, not only for the actor but the human being. There is just it is a one-year course in many ways, but it's also a 2-weekend vibrant, being workshop, learning the basics and building from there. So there are people in our house today who walked out, who marched during the Chicano moratorium. And because of you, I am here, we are here. When I say I stand on the shoulder of giants, or we stand on the shoulder of giants, that is you, and we thank you. We thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alex Alvanesian, and I'm with State Senator Susan Rubio's office. Thank you to both Luis Valdez and Jorge Huerta for their service to Chicano theater. And go ahead. And with that being said, for Luis Valdez, on behalf of the California State Senate, it is my honor to present you with the certificate in recognition of your remarkable contributions to American theater and culture. Your contributions to Chicano theater will have long-lasting impacts for future generations. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And for Jorge Huerta, on behalf of the California State Senate, it is my honor to present you with this certificate in recognition of your outstanding contributions to American theater and culture. Your academic work surrounding Chicano theater will have long-lasting impacts for future generations. Congratulations.
Hello, everyone. Soy Cassandra Carmona. I am a field representative with the California State Assembly District 49 with Assembly Member Mike Fong, who was a Los Angeles Community College trustee. So you may have heard of him, you may know him. And we're proud to be here to represent. Gracias a todos por venir. Por favor, organízanse. Usa sus voces, use your voice, please, to fight and to continue the legacy of both Luis Valdez and Dr. Jorge Huerta. Yes, yeah. They made very big strides for each and every one of you, so please connect and come together with your community and continue their work. And with that, on behalf of the California State Assembly, it is my privilege to present the both of you with these certificates of recognition for the Theater of Sphere celebrating Luis Valdez and the Teatro Chicano Town Hall here at ELAC. So thank you for your contributions to Chicano American theater arts and culture, and thank you for providing exceptional opportunities to discuss theater arts and your legacies. Congratulations. Let's give them a big round of applause.